So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some programs you did. You kind of traveled around to different schools, right? Giving talks. Can you tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about what you were doing?
I try to do it on a couple of different levels. Um, they always have these kind of, I guess you would call it straight talk, scared straight programs where they would bring in teens and, maybe folks who've been convicted of crimes and they bring a cop in, you know, and the idea would be to scare kids, away from crime. So we started something called the Law Squad that was there. And yes, we had a police officer, but we also had a judge, usually a judge of color. Um, and what we talked to the kids was about their rights and about how to get through a traffic stop without, getting pulled over. Teach the kids, look, you're not going to win the argument on the street. If you ran a stop sign, the officer says, you know what I did wrong? Just say, yeah, I ran a stop sign. Just take the ticket because the goal is to survive the confrontation. It's not to win the ticket. And so it got very very popular. But then unfortunately we lost the funding that paid for the. I was one. My time was pro bono, but the other folks got stipends from the government, and we ended up that program. But it was a unique way because the parents came in thinking it was going to be one thing. And then we would explain, like if there's four of you in a car and the guy in the back seat drops, cocaine in the front seat, you're all screwed. Like just to educate kids on what the law is, because so many of them think, well, I wasn't holding it. So it was to teach them how the police could interact with them, what they would say to them to get them to talk about something that maybe they shouldn't talk about. If you're in a car with your friends, learn that's not the time to fool around. You know, put the interior light on. That'll calm the officer down. Put your hands on the steering wheel, and teaching the parents. I would say to them, you ever tell your child, like, where do you keep the license, registration, insurance card? Have that at the ready. Instead of fumbling around for opening the glove compartment or doing something. Just these are things you don't think about. Yes, we're all nervous about them driving, getting into accidents, but they have to be aware that a police confrontation on the side of the road is a dangerous thing for all the parties involved, and how to prepare for that. How to say, I'm not talking till either my parent or a lawyer comes here. No matter what you're told, just say, look, I'm not answering questions. Parents don't know that here in New York, until the recent law change, the police could talk to your child without you present if they're 16. They still can if they're 17, 18. Obviously, once they're 18, they're adults. When can you get your first phone call? And what does that mean? Does the officer have to tell you why you're arrested? And I was very lucky that the officers who were assigned were from the community policing program. So they were on that mission. And again, talking about what we were talking about before, it's very important who you select to send that message. They could have been cynical. They could have just said, listen, it's simple. If you don't do the crime, you're going to worry about, and they're going to be would have been a whole different program. But because they were on board of the importance of doing that. And part of the way that I got them into it too is, guess what? Police, the one way they're most often hurt are on car stops. Single car stops are very dangerous to police officers. Okay, let's not make believe that there aren't bad people in the world. They get hit by cars that are passing by. So that the idea was, we can also educate the public to make it safer for the officer. Let him write his ticket. Let him go home to his family, and our kids can go home to theirs.
Sounds like a plan, man. I wish
Yeah.
more people had that mindset because that's all we want, That is
Yeah,
all we
and
want.
again, people don't think about these things until someone prods them to, and makes them try to, you know, think ahead about every possible consequence. And that's what I mean before when I was saying that, race impacts almost every area of law, from the traffic stop to buying a home. you can't separate it from American law. It's just that it's that simple. Maybe in Utah, that's where there is no diversity, but just about everywhere else, it comes into play.
Yeah, and it's not just, we are talking about the law here, and you're right. But I also want to highlight the fact that, the whole scenario that you're drawing out here, right, where you were just talking about how we have to, like, dig in and explain every different kind of scenario, and prepare people. What are you preparing people for? You're preparing people to enter a specific type of environment, right, and situation and scenario. And not everyone needs to be as prepared for that scenario as others, There is a common refrain that I hear over and over for the last 3 decades I've been having these conversations from white people who say, I never have to think about anything like that. I never have to worry about that. I've never even considered that I might be in danger or something like that from a police officer. And so that's kind of the even underlying, I think, more foundational consequence of the racial hierarchy that was pushed for generations in the country, is that it has created a divide in experience that is severe. And the only way to kind of get past that boundary is either believing a black person or a person of color who's experiencing those consequences and can speak on it, or learning about it from a book, I guess. Really, or a YouTube video or whatever.
Or
but
some form of art, some medium, a painting, a photograph, a story, a poem, art reaches that level. And again, that's the importance of diversifying the authors and artists that students are exposed to in education. Sure, read Catcher in the Rye, but also read Native Son. It's part of just trying to recognize experience, like you said. That is the real problem, is that there's there's multiple levels of experience, but there's certainly 2 divided levels. We label it as privilege, and that's what really, when we talk about privilege, is that you haven't experienced this because of who you are and how you look. A perfect example. So the Dominican Republic used to be owned by France, and so a lot of Dominicans like myself have French last names. And I've had judges say things to me that they would never say if my last name was Perez or Rodriguez or Jimenez, okay? Because I look white. I don't have a Hispanic surname. So, it would make me imagine, what is that judge thinking when some of my colleagues who are Latino are in front of them? My very first major trial for the city, I had to report a judge to the Judicial Conduct Commission because the plaintiff, I was the defendant, the plaintiff was late, and he said to the plaintiff's lawyer, well, did you impress on her the importance of being on time? And he said, yeah, I'm sure she just, there was no cell phones back then or beepers. It's like, yeah, I'm sure she just missed her bus, or, let's give her a little bit of time. And then he said, well, did you really impress on her? Because, these people don't think along the same linear plane of thought that us Anglos do. So my adversary, who was Jewish, knew that I was Dominican. He just shot me aside and like, you're gonna take this, right? And so I said, Judge, present company accepted. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, first of all, I hate to break the news to you, but you and him are Jewish. The Anglos don't consider you Anglos. Let's just, there's not an Anglo here. Let's just start with that. And secondly, I'm Dominican, like the plaintiff. And I like to think, along the same logical plane of thought that everybody else in the room does. So, of course, he apologized, let it go. Then the next day, the plaintiff was going to call her doctor. And he said, what kind of doctor are you calling? And at that time, he didn't have to tell the other side. And he goes, it doesn't call one of our doctors. And he goes, it's not one of these voodoo doctors that these people go to. And so I said, okay, Judge, now I need to, put this on the record.
Just for the record for our viewers, that is a judge.
Yes. in the Supreme Court, in the trial court, in a serious case. And I said, Judge, she broke her collarbone and her arm, and you think she's going to a voodoo doctor? I said that's a racist comment because she's Caribbean. Like, yes, I said. I joke. I said, by the way, Judge, Dominicans, it's Santeria. Voodoo is the other part of the island. That's Haiti. I said, okay, but we don't do either. When we break our bones, we go to an orthopedist, or so I'm sure it's going to be a chiropractor or an orthopedist. And I filed
you were doing like 3 jobs there, man.
Yeah,
teaching the judge, helping your client.
I said, how come I keep having to defend the plaintiff? I said, the worst thing about this is you're making me defend my adversary. I said, she's just suing a city. She had an accident, and you have all these racist overtones. And the judge, the Judicial Commission decided that an appropriate remedy was for the judge to apologize to me one-on-one, and that he'd learned, and it went on. But are you telling me that I think all that judge learned was not to say things out loud?
Precisely. Exactly.
He didn't all of a sudden say, oh, you know what? I'm a racist SOB, man. I got to rethink this whole judge thing, because here I am judging people, and I'm thinking that, Dominicans might go to voodoo doctors when they break their arms. No, it was just like, whoo, that was a close one.
It really just makes you think, like, what is the universe of thoughts like that? How big is it?
That's my point.
What's in there? Like, it's very worrisome.
That's what gets you right. And I often said, because I talked to my supervisor for a long time, was like, I was just starting my legal career. I'm going to file a complaint against the judge, and the word was going to get around, and she was wise enough to say, it's not going to get around. This is bad. Like, he's not going to tell anybody. He's not going to tell anybody this story. This is ridiculously racist, And she goes, no, you should definitely file. We'll support you, 100%. You're going to file this complaint.